back on the line with us, Vic Abola of UANP. Good to have you back, Vic.
Okay.
Great,
Yeah.
5.2% for the third quarter. Which one do you think is
Yeah,
going
yeah.
to have more of an impact? Is it the typhoons or is it the anomalous flood control projects and the
Well,
corruption that goes with it?
mostly the corruption issue, because we've seen in the last July and August, it dropped actually minus 11% in current in capital spending of the national government.
All right, so you chose corruption issues, and because you did, there's a lot more we don't know. And in fact, the level of frozen assets has gone beyond 5 billion, and we have yet to know more as the ICI live streams the investigations. So to what extent do you think that might affect fourth quarter GDP, given all the unknowns?
I think that's going to be with us for a while until it's satisfactorily settled. However, we do have some positive news for especially for the consumer. My projected average inflation for fourth quarter is only 1.6. So that will enable consumers to, continue their spending, but also we've seen a big jump in employment last month. So, and I guess those two things really combined in order to give at least performance still around the 5.5.
Got that. And it's one metric that the Bangko Sentral Governor, Eli Remolona himself, is tracking along with the performance in the stock market and the peso. As you know, the peso's already fallen to a fresh 9-month low, and the stock market's fallen below 6,000 in the previous month. To what extent might that keep the Bangko Sentral from cutting in December?
I think they will continue cutting. They will cut another 25 basis points, and I believe they can do some more in 2026 by at least 50 basis points. And that will just bring us to policy rate at the end of 2026 to 4%, which is higher than where we came from. For a long time, we had policy rate of 3%. But, 3% is fairly good enough because the low interest rates will enable actually the private sector to be, especially in the residential construction. So it's a slowdown because your monthly amortizations have gone up. And it's so important that the BSP supports not only residential but overall firms in order to expand their operations.
Yeah, but Vic, what we haven't seen is that the peso has fallen to fresh 9-month lows. I know that you've long advocated for the Bangko Sentral to allow the peso to weaken. It has weakened and is weakening some more. So do you think a weakened peso might constrain the Bangko Sentral from cutting a lot more than it should?
I think they have an informal threshold, but they will probably allow it to depreciate some more. I think at this time they would have like 60 as a threshold that they wouldn't want to cross because of sentiment. So, but overall, it continues to depreciate right now. It's not very, very large. Actually, we're talking about 2% or a little bit than 2% depreciation for every peso. So it's not, it's not so substantial, but it helps a lot for all the values, our exporters to be able to compete. All the values will really, I think, drive part of the consumption spending in the fourth quarter.
Well, there are two sides. It could be inflationary. A lot more Filipinos unable to afford what they can at the current levels. But a weaker peso also augurs well for our remitting overseas Filipino workers. But Vic, there is President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act, Foreign Remittance Tax Bill, and that is taking effect on January 1st of 2026. So that means a 1% tax on all of the remittances from the U.S. to international destinations like the Philippines. So what impact do you think this might have on remittance flows, which are so important to GDP?
Well, I think the thing is that if the peso depreciates a bit to compensate for that tax that is going to be imposed on remittances, then there'll be no minimum effect. So, but the peso should depreciate by that much in order to compensate for that. Now, the idea that inflation is very much affected by the change rate, the pass-through, what we call it pass-through from the peso depreciation to inflation is quite low, hovering between 10 to 15%. Meaning 10% is like in depreciation would lead only to like 1% to 1.5%. So it's not a major issue, especially at this time where we have already low inflation below the BSP target.
All right, we got that. Then we're holding on to 5.2 as that is your forecast, the lowest so far from what we have gathered. Thank you so much, Vic Abola of UANP. I much appreciate the insights.